licensing, and others. And don't forget taco trucks and other mobile food vehicles. We also help individual business owners with questions or issues. I'm a former Small Business Development Center advisor and director of a Business Resource Center. So I came to LNI with a strong understanding of small businesses and the many challenges they face. As Jessie said, I'm here with Erica Minton from LNI's Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Erica is an industrial hygienist and one of DOSH's consultants who regularly work with businesses to help them learn and comply with safety and health requirements and best practices. And she has strong expertise regarding operations during this COVID-19 pandemic. So as Jessie said, our presentation is Safe Reopening During This Pandemic. Just a sec. Okay. And I'm going to provide some general information and then leave lots of time for Q&A with Erica. Next slide, please. All right. So there are three primary sources for safe reopening information. The governor's site at governor.wa.gov, the state site at coronavirus.wa.gov, and then LNI's coronavirus page, accessed from LNI's homepage at lni.wa.gov. Next slide. I'm starting here with the governor's website. That's where you'll find the reopening guidance for businesses and workers list. The list is sorted by phase, from phase 1 to 3. No communities are in phase 4 yet, and sorted by industry. If you click on your industry, you'll access a comprehensive document with information specific to that industry, as well as general guidance. Unfortunately, many businesses don't fit neatly in one particular industry category. And so in those cases, I recommend you find the ones that are most relevant, review them all, and follow them as best you can, hedging toward the most conservative of the descriptions that you read. Next slide. This is the state's coronavirus website, and here you'll find all kinds of information, including county phase status, where each county falls in phase 1, 2, 3, and links to the Washington Department of Health resources, which are helpful for understanding your responsibilities to the general public, and special requirements related to food establishments, among other things. Next slide. And this is LNI's homepage. The COVID-19 resources are accessed from this banner heading, and clicking there will lead to information from many of LNI's divisions, including workers' compensation, wage and hour, particularly related to paid sick leave, changes in office hours and services during the pandemic, and LNI's Division of Occupational Safety and Health, or DOSH. Next slide. So DOSH administers both the Washington Industrial Safety and Health Act, or WSHA, and the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA. New guidance for employers has come out on both state and federal levels and is captured on an updated DOSH website. Whether you're in operation now or you're planning for your reopening, it's important that you read through these DOSH materials. You'll find general workplace guidance and many industry-specific resources. Another smart thing to do is to take advantage of DOSH's free consultation services. With literally thousands of safety and health rules, having a DOSH consultant come to your location and ensure you're complying with all of the requirements that apply to your business saves you a lot of time and energy and makes great sense. And as I mentioned earlier, Erica Minton, one of our consultants, is on this webinar now. Next slide. Here are a couple examples of industry-specific resources available on our website. You'll see here a janitorial tip sheet and guidance information for grocery stores and other retailers. Just a couple samples. Next slide. This slide displays some of the COVID-19 requirements that apply to all employers. Details about each of these requirements are found on the publication noted on the slide, which is available through LNI's website. All right, face coverings. Face coverings are required for all employees unless they're working alone, and for your customers, vendors, and contractors who come in contact with your employees. Business owners and managers are responsible for ensuring their use. And social distancing is required, of course. I'm sure you're very aware of the 6-foot rule. You've likely seen other efforts as well toward ensuring appropriate social distancing, such as in grocery stores and other businesses. One-way aisles, marking on the floor for checkout queues. Some businesses may need to physically change their setup, possibly spacing out workstations, scheduling staff with multiple shifts so fewer people are working at a time, or implementing other strategies. Where distancing isn't possible, using physical barriers can help prevent transmission of the disease, like plexiglass that shields checkers in the grocery store. And hand washing. You're required to provide fixed or portable hand washing facilities and hand sanitizers for convenient use in between hand washings. You'll need to ensure frequent sanitizing of commonly touched surfaces and regularly clean and sanitize floors, counters, and other surfaces, providing gloves and eye protection to those who will be handling chemicals. You'll need to have procedures to address sick employees, ensuring they know to stay home, and then you'll need to do a deep cleaning and sanitizing of areas where a sick person had worked. You're required now to contact your local health authority within 24 hours if you suspect COVID-19 is spreading in your workplace or if 2 or more workers have contracted it. And finally, you'll need to provide education to your employees about preventing COVID-19 workplace hazards, ensuring they know the signs, symptoms, and risk factors associated with the virus and how to prevent it from spreading. The PowerPoint shown here, Basic Employee Training on COVID-19 Infection Prevention, catchy title, is a helpful resource for training your staff. Next slide. We get a lot of questions about face masks. Again, they're required for all employees who aren't working alone unless they have a medical issue or condition and their medical provider affirms the needed accommodation, or they're an employee who relies on lip reading or expression cueing. This DOSH publication, Which Mask for Which Task, is very helpful for determining what level of mask is required for your employees depending on the work they do. There's also a new mask FAQ on our website, accessed from the LNI coronavirus page. And as I mentioned earlier, face coverings of some kind are also required now for your customers and vendors and contractors, except for those who have a medical condition that makes wearing a face mask difficult. While you'll want medical documentation regarding an employee's inability to wear a mask, with customers, the guidance from the governor is that you take their word for it. Next slide. So how can businesses comply with state face covering and distancing requirements and avoid alienating customers? This publication from the governor's office includes some best practices for business owners. Signage is a great place to start. It doesn't have to be fancy, but alerting customers to the fact that the business has to follow the law may help deflect the ire of certain customers from you and your staff. We got a call recently from the owner of a gas station mini mart that had old style gas pumps without credit card automation on them. And he called our office in great frustration. Customers had to enter the store to pay, and many claimed they couldn't wear face masks, though frankly, he didn't believe most of them. The owner was especially concerned because he had a couple employees with conditions that put them at higher risk, yet he desperately needed income and couldn't afford to alienate customers. We recommended that he put signage about the mask requirement on the pumps themselves, as well as the entry to the mini mart, and noted the presence of vulnerable people as well as the legal requirement. And there may be other ways to offer accommodation, or there may be ways to offer accommodation to those who can't or won't wear a mask. In the gas station's case, perhaps having an outside cashier. For other types of businesses, perhaps curbside pickup with a phone number to call when the customer arrives, an option for delivery, or an appointment time to meet a particular customer when others won't be there who are at risk. You won't want to physically block or remove people, but it's probably time, if you don't already have one, to develop a procedure for removing people from your premises up to and including calling law enforcement for trespassing. Businesses have the right to deny service to people who won't follow their rules. Next slide. There are a variety of signs available to download on the coronavirus.org website. This is a sample of one. There are a variety of other ones, as I noted. Next slide. This article, I'm not going to read it all, but this is from the Lewiston Tribune last week, which was kind of addressing the challenges faced by all of us as we adapt to the public mask requirement. Just reading some of the underlined sections. So, Asotin County Public Health Administrator Brady Woodbury said retailers who serve maskless customers may face fines or lose their business licenses. And Woodbury says, there are very few legitimate reasons not to wear a mask. If someone has a valid medical reason, they're probably at high risk for COVID anyway and should be getting deliveries or using curbside services. Oops. Trying to navigate my notes here. And then further down there, people who don't wear masks can be barred from Washington establishments even if they claim to have a health exemption. I would urge everyone to take a common sense approach. Be polite, be respectful, and follow the law. Next slide.
Celia?
Yeah.
Which slide is this? Is this 13? I think there's kind of out of sync with slides on some of the comments.
Okay, so what are you seeing? Oh, I should look up it. I can change that. Appreciate you letting me know. That's the slide that I want to be on.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Okay. To protect worker safety, DOSH compliance officers actively enforce safety and health laws during this pandemic and always. They do random inspections, plus respond to worker safety concerns received through phone calls and through our website. By law, DOSH compliance officers are required to investigate and to cite and fine for violations. The law places the responsibility of knowing applicable requirements on employers, and in most cases, doesn't give DOSH officers the option to merely give a warning. With these emergency rules with the pandemic, DOSH has been charged with compliance authority for the governor's phased-in Safe Start plan, including requiring customers to wear face coverings. Businesses that decide to be open early relative to approved phases or to operate in direct violation of the governor's orders may be cited and fined for unsafe workplace conditions. In the case of Safe Start plan violations, if employers are found to be out of compliance with the governor's guidance, they'll be informed and directed to close or adjust operations accordingly. And if they don't, they'll face a workplace safety citation of $10,000 or more and risk losing their business license. It's just not fair for businesses that are following the law to face a competitive disadvantage from businesses that are defying it. All right, and the next slide should be the last one that says questions. Hopefully that's where you are. And so that's it for what I was going to present, and now we're open to any questions that you may have. So, Jesse,
Celia, there is one question. What type of records do we need to keep regarding employee temperatures and symptoms, et cetera?
This is Erica Minton. I can answer that actually. So you don't necessarily have to keep the record of the specific temperatures or symptoms. You just have to make sure that you are asking those questions. So you could basically say, ask the questions and put like the names. So you don't necessarily have to keep that information somewhere. Now, if you had like an affirmative, yes, they have symptoms and I sent them home, you'd want to note that. But if it's just normal, you don't have to write those down.
So Erica, can you describe whether that's a practice that every business should be doing every day with employees?
There are some specific industries where it's required, and then there's some where really it's just a good practice. So most industries, I think, are essentially required to do some sort of a health monitor before people come into work. So like agriculture is required. It kind of, with each individual industry, it kind of depends, but you should be screening because there has to be a way to identify if someone is exhibiting symptoms before they come to work. Does that make sense?
Yes. And where would someone find out if their industry has a requirement?
So a lot of those links that you mentioned, the governor's webpage, coronavirus.wa.gov, has information about different industries and what phase you're in for those reopenings. And typically that's in there, as well as our website has fact sheets for each specific industry.
Okay, and it looks like there's another question, and someone asked if they want a DOSH review and are found not to be in clients, will they be fined?
So if you request, so I work with DOSH consultation. If you request a consultation with us, you could come either on site and do just a limited consult for COVID, or a comprehensive for everything on the workplace, which can range from your accident prevention program, just everything, a job walk around. And the deal with that is that we don't find you, we just ask that you change the things that we find. So if it's something that's considered like a general hazard, more of a paperwork issue, we would just request that you do fix that, but we don't issue penalties. If it was something more serious, say it was a risk for amputation, we'd cite that as serious, but we just request that you fix it in a certain amount of time. So we don't actually tell you that you're not fined in any way, you're not punished for it. And then we work with you if, say, we give you 30 days to fix something and you need additional time to fix it. We're really flexible on that.
Let me just add that it makes, back to using consultation, those rules exist for safety and health. It's really nice to have someone like Erica come out and tell you about it, make sure you know them all. You'll not be fined for that. If they received, if DOSH, we received at LNI, a concern or complaint, our compliance staff would have to go out there and likely cite and fine. So it just makes so much sense to have an expert come out and tell you on the front end rather than learn about it on a much more fiscally painful end.
Yeah, and it's no cost to you. The consultations are no cost. It's just we work out a time and do things at your convenience, rather than say you had an incident and then compliance had to come with a complaint.
Okay, and then we had another person ask, they say that they are Washington's nonprofit with a retail license, but they are operating on federal lands in national park, which does not require massive social distancing.
Jesse,
Sorry,
there's a lot of interference on your mic. Perhaps somebody else could ask the question.
I can read it on Jesse's behalf, if that's okay. It's Hillary here.
Oh, thank you, Hillary.
Is the audio okay on mine?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. So next question is, we plan to have a curbside kiosk for sales in a national park, so federal lands. We are a Washington nonprofit with a retailer's license, and federal lands do not require masks or social distancing, but they're encouraged. So their question is, at a curbside operation, must our nonprofit require masks for retail sales? Our volunteers and employees will all wear masks and follow state rules. Is it required though?
So that's a really good question. It gets a little sticky with when you have state businesses on federal lands. It's probably a bit more of a health department question, but for the actual customers, it's likely that since they're on federal lands, it's not necessarily required. It's strongly encouraged. But for your employees, you would absolutely be required because you are a state business.
Awesome, thank you. There was another question that came up. It says, any ideas for hand washing stations for a small painting company? Who's responsible for providing these stations? Are they the subcontractors or the general contractor?
Another good question. So the hand washing stations, there are a couple of options. I know some places do rent them out, the actual portable ones. You can also improvise. So you could get some coolers with running water, provided that you could actually, refill them and have soap. It has to be running water. It can't just be like Purell, even though that can work in addition to it. So if your general contractor has agreed to provide them, you can use them, but you have to make sure as the contractor actually have something available. So it really depends. I wouldn't necessarily rely on anyone else because your employees have to have access to it.
Okay, thank you. And it doesn't look like there's been any additional questions, so anyone feel free to throw some questions in the Q&A pod or that function that says Q&A. Is there anything either you, Erica, or Celia, that you guys would like to just re-emphasize for everyone?
I would say that, with COVID, everything's just rapidly changing. So make sure that you're keeping updated because some things have changed over the past few weeks. For the most part, it's, social distancing, wearing the masks, and maintaining, health and safety at your workplace. But another thing to think about is your accident prevention programs. So every business with one employer or more is required to have a written accident prevention program. And that includes anything that's a recognized health hazard. So if, with COVID, I would have had a plan for COVID somewhere written down so that you are following that.
Thanks, Erica. How about you, Celia? Anything you'd want to re-emphasize?
Well, I assume that if they're on the line, it's because they're familiar with the Small Business Development Center, but I think it's so valuable to work with one of the advisors, SBDC advisors, to help really look at your business holistically, following, of course, all these kinds of rules that Eric and I are addressing, but also what are your business practice? How do you kind of preserve your cash, make very careful expenditures? How do you weather through a time of such unknowns? So that would be one thing I'd say. I wonder, Erica, could you talk a little more about those businesses that are more mobile as opposed to ones that are brick and mortar? So maybe you're a delivery person, or you're a consultant that goes from location to location. What are some things you need to do related to COVID in those situations?
So I would say if you're a delivery person, especially for a construction site, keep in mind the places you're delivering to will have procedures to let you on their work site and honor that. Obviously they may have a temperature screen to allow you on their work site. Make sure you check in with somebody and don't just show up and then they might have a problem, say if you did have COVID. Thing is, make sure you have enough supplies. So if you're a business that has 2 to 3 employees that make deliveries, make sure that they have PPE with them and that they understand what your policies are, because sometimes the workforce who's out in the field doesn't always get the same level of information because they're coming and going so frequently. So for me, I'm out in the field quite a bit, and we have basically a supply of hand sanitizer and PPE for us to stay safe, and then we have a list of expectations for us in the field as well.
Thank you both. And we actually had 2 more questions come in while you were talking. One question was if you could share any resources for bulk hand sanitizer, alcohol spray, or wipes, or etc. Because there's a retail store who's on the line that's having a hard time keeping up with supplies. Are there any resources we're able to share with them where they could find something in bulk?
So that one is really tricky. I don't have a good resource for you. I can take down your email and see if I can find something. I know the health departments, there are some counties that are kind of stockpiling more PPE, but hand sanitizer and alcohol spray wipes, it has been a bit of a challenge. I know that some producers have been ramping up for, say they were distilleries, and they've been ramping up for those products, but it really does depend where you're at. And again, I can take down your email and see if I can find any resources, but off the top of my head, I don't have anything unless Celia does.
Oh, no, I can't say I do, other than you did mention the fact that you could bring a big cooler of water, soap and water, and maybe
Yeah.
something that we have to think about doing if we can't find the sanitizer we need.
Yeah, soap and water does work as well.
Thanks. And then another person asked if you could please repeat how to request a DOSH review.
So a DOSH consultation, you can go to our website, and there's under safety and health, it says request a DOSH consultation, or you can email me. I believe my email is on this webinar as well. And depending on what region you're in, so I work primarily out of Eastern Washington, but we go throughout the entire state. So depending on where you are, you'll be routed to the right consultant who's in that area for you. But typically the easiest way is to go to lni.wa.gov. Under safety and health, it says request a DOSH consultation. But again, if you email me, I can route your request as well.
So Erica, could I ask, I've had questions from folks about how do you deal with an employee who you've told them to wear their mask and then you find that they're not? Do you have any suggestions for that?
So it gets tricky because you don't want to be the bad guy, but it is part of your disciplinary process. So, you know, you can start by asking and kind of maybe retraining employees as to why they're wearing them, and, you know, maybe get some buy-in, because it is pretty new for everybody, and it's hard to convince everybody to wear them all day long. If there's a reason, maybe talk to that employee and say, why are you having trouble? Is there a different type of mask we can get you? Is there something else we can do? But ultimately, it is part of your responsibility as a business owner to make sure your employees are following the safe reopening guidance. So that can be part of a disciplinary process. You know, you don't want to start there, but that might be ultimately the way it goes. Unless they request a medical accommodation, then they do have to be reasonably accommodated, but that can't be an excuse not to wear one, because I know that has been coming up more.
So if a DOSH compliance officer came to my business and saw that I had employees not wearing masks.
Yeah, I mean, potentially they could find the employer. So ultimately you're liable. Now, if it's a, you know, once in a while somebody's working outside, it's hot, and they pull down their mask to take a breath, that's a little bit different. But if it's pretty blatant that everyone's working closely together and not wearing their masks, you probably could get a citation.
This is Cheryl. I have a question also from the other perspective, wherein employers and businesses are asked to be the enforcers of the mask requirements. Do you have recommendations for interactions with customers if customers don't want to comply?
I mean, ultimately, you do have the right to refuse service. Obviously, you don't want to start there either, but you could say, you know, I've seen a lot of good signage where it's like, out of respect for those with health issues, or, you know, just have that conversation that this is not necessarily, you might not agree with it, but this is to protect our most vulnerable. It's a state order, so we can be punished for not for not following through on this. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to convince customers to do the right thing, but maybe if you approach it in a manner that's not necessarily initially confrontational, it makes it a little bit easier. And then also, if you think about, say, Yakima or Benton City, they weren't allowed to open for quite a while, and one of the caveats to start reopening was to wear those face masks. So, you know, you don't want to regress into the opening phases. So I think that's a good starting point to say, if we all wear masks, maybe we can move forward with opening rather than having to think about shutting things down with an increase of cases. I don't know if that helps, but it is difficult, I know.
No, thank you very much.
Well, if there are no other questions, we might be ending early today. I did appreciate you, Celia, giving us a shout out, the Washington Small Business Development Centers. We are working with L&I to help share all this information, keep everyone up to date. So keep on a lookout for future upcoming webinars. And if there's nothing else, we might just give everyone a few more minutes of their life back.
Yeah, and if you have questions for me, you know, anything about safety, doesn't have to be related to COVID. You can always email. It doesn't have to be a full consultation. If you just have a couple questions here and there, we're happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. Oh, and of course, we just have one more question that popped up real quick. Do UV sanitizing wands work for cleaning rules?
So that's a good question. Typically, we say that you should follow the EPA guidance, and I don't believe those have technically been approved. They can work for like spot cleaning. I don't see an issue with that because it's been used like in hospitals and other things. But as far as actual sanitation, you should follow the EPA for like a deep cleaning, what their particular effective against COVID cleaners are. Those are the ones you really should be using. Does that help?
I hope so. For whoever asked that question, I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah, they said, yes, thank you.
Okay.
And if there are no other questions, I'll give you a couple seconds. But thank you so much, Celia and Erica, for being able to speak on this topic today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the platform, and please do see Erica and Celia, as resources. You're welcome to contact us anytime, even for unrelated questions that we can get you answers for. All right, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.